Hello, good evening. Good evening, good afternoon. I don't know what's going on. Oh, there we are.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today, Stephen.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with Hello Ladies, which we have a movie going now. It's almost the third iteration. It started as a stand-up special, moved into a TV series, and now it's a movie. So if you could just talk a little bit about where you got the concept and the idea for it, and then how it continued to evolve through those three different formats.
Yes, three different iterations. It sounds like you're basically implying that I'm really bleeding the money out of this particular one idea. There's going to be a board game and a selection of erotic toys. Well, it began life as a stand-up routine. I had done stand-up comedy many years ago, and I went back to stand-up about 5 years back. And I discovered that the thing that people most seemed to engage with were my stories of my sort of pitiful romantic life. And it's not quite as bad as I make it out to be. But certainly over the years I'd accumulated lots of sort of, ill-fated dating stories and just, and kind of trying to figure out how I thought life would change, becoming well known. And thinking that somehow would open a door to a sort of world of beautiful women. And what I've discovered really is that I just get rejected by a better class of woman now than I ever did before. I mean, I'm being turned down by models. I got a lot of great actresses saying no to me. I mean, some household names have refused to sleep with me. So, and so I discovered, as I say, that the audience seemed to go for the stuff about me sort of being, pathetic in that regard. And I did the show in Los Angeles, and some HBO people came along and said, would you think about doing it as a TV show? And I didn't want to play myself. I felt that there was a lot of shows where comics played themselves, so I sort of created this web designer character. Not that there's anything wrong with, people who work in the World Wide Web or the internet or anything like that. But it just seemed like a way that he could make some money and probably work at home, and also that he thought of himself as like a kind of pioneer. He was in the technology world, and that therefore, why shouldn't he be a celebrity in a sense? And this character's like dreaming of being inside the world of the beautiful people. That is what sort of Los Angeles represents. Certainly to people like me who grew up in the sort of suburbs of England, LA always seemed very glamorous and exotic. And then when you spend time there, you realize that many of the people, as it were, behind the red velvet ropes, inside the VIP areas, are just as desperate as my character. People who, were probably nerds at school, who've sort of gone to LA and reinvented themselves as actors or producers or whatever else. And that they're really just people who are trying to teach the world a lesson, and basically say to all the girls that said no to them, look at me now, I run a studio, or I've won an Oscar, or whatever it might be. And I'm not going to name names, but we all know who I'm talking about. We don't know who I'm talking about. And so that's where it came. And then the show came along, and then they let me do this sort of movie length version of the show.
So LA is a ridiculous place in general. Mm-hmm. I would love to hear, as an outsider, someone who came across from overseas, what is your favorite, most ridiculous part about the LA kind of VIP scene?
Well, it didn't begin VIP for me. The first time I ever went to Los Angeles was to interview porn stars for a very short-lived 2-part British TV show. It was on Sky TV, owned by Rupert Murdoch. And what they'd done, Rupert, I don't know if he personally had got hold of these, but someone had got hold of some porn outtakes and bloopers. Like you see these shows where like they show clips from behind the scenes of, an actor not being able to get through the door. And this was the same, except they were naked, with erections. And they thought, we can make a 2-part TV show out of this. And they phoned Rupert Murdoch. He was like, definitely. And so my friend was working on the show, and I was in my early 20s, and they said, we need someone to go to Los Angeles to interview porn stars to sort of fill out this hour of TV. And so, I got given this job on a Friday, and on Monday I was in Vivid Entertainment, which is one of the bigger porn companies. And I was interviewing a girl called Devon, And Devon, if you're not aware, is a region in the southwest of England that a lot of people spend time holidaying in. And so at one point I said to Devon, I've spent a lot of time in Devon. I imagine there's a lot of guys around here who can say the same thing. And no idea, absolutely no idea what I was talking about. I met Ron Jeremy. And then I remember I went to a house, I don't know how X-rated I can get, I'll try and keep it clean, but I went to a house that was lived in by a porn actress and her husband. He was a former NASA scientist. I don't know how they'd met, I don't know what kind of like NASA porn mixer they were at, but every evening at 7 o'clock she would go online to her fans. There was webcams all over the house, and she would talk to her fans, and they would ask her, questions, and then she would perform some kind of, porno activity with her husband or anyone else who called in, from the business. Not like the postman or the FedEx guy, but, And so I was sat there, and my camera team were filming me, and she was online, and I was sat next to her, and all these people, porn enthusiasts, started saying, "Who's this loser with the glasses? I want to look at him." And she was saying, "Oh, he's a journalist, like I was a journalist, but he's some interviewer from England." And they said, "We don't want to see that four-eyed English, And suddenly her husband appeared, and kind of they started making out, and they disappeared upstairs. And I was now just sat in their living room, like, not sure what's going on. I wasn't sure if like the perverts were still watching me on the webcam. And eventually the husband appeared from upstairs, and he just went, "Are you coming up?" Right. Is it rude to not go up at that moment? So we went upstairs. I'll keep it vague, but there were various eroticisms taking place. And at one point, the husband handed me the camera and said, "I'm going to jump in." And now I'm in a bedroom holding a camera that's streaming live on the web of some people, and I think making love is too poetic a term. And I realized now I'm a pornographer. Now I've just become a pornographer. And I was holding this camera, and then I remembered all these guys who'd been insulting me, so I just pointed the camera at the wall. So I don't know what premium prices they were paying, but they just got 20 minutes of noises and like the side of a wardrobe. And that was my first experience of LA. And it's never been that sexy or erotic since.
Shifting gears slightly to your childhood. What was your introduction to the comedy world? When did you
I thought you were going to say my introduction to porn. My introduction to the comedy world? Yes. My introduction to the comedy world? I guess, I don't know, I remember doing a school play in which I played a vicar, a priest, and I was judging a dance contest. And I was supposed to all I was supposed to do was read out the winners of this contest. And then for some reason, I was about 12 or something, I said, and the winner is a bottle of milk and 2 loaves of bread. I'm sorry, that's my wife's shopping list. Now, I was 12. I was 12 years old. Give me a break. The parents and the other kids thought that was hysterical. They were more sophisticated than you people. And I got a laugh, and I remember thinking, oh, this is good. And that was my first sort of experience of being on stage and sort of having a comic response. But my dad was always a fan of comedy. My dad is a funny man. And I was a big fan of Monty Python and then later Woody Allen and people. So it became something that I thought, well, maybe I could do that for a living, and I dabbled with radio and things at university, and then eventually I tried stand-up, and off we went, really.
And how do you make that transition from just having a good time doing comedy, doing it almost as a hobby, to realizing I want to make a career out of this?
Well, it's funny. Some people have asked me in the past what do I think the distinction is between American and English people, and I always feel like in America, if you said I want to be president as a kid, people would be like, go for it, shoot for the stars. And in England, if you say I want to be prime minister, people go, yeah, right, good luck with that, yeah. And there is a general sort of certain feeling that special things happen to other people, you know. And for some reason, I never had that negativity. It wasn't that I was arrogant. I just thought, well, look, it happened for John Cleese from Monty Python, and it happened to, you know, Eddie Izzard and people that I admired. And I thought, well, why don't I try, you know, and see if I can make a go of it? And so I started doing radio and stand-up and things. And very quickly, your hobby transitions into maybe not a career, but like a semi-professional. You know, you make a bit of money while you're doing an office job, doing some comedy and stuff, and somewhere along the line it sort of turns into a profession, you know. But it's a slow burn, and it takes a long time to kind of learn the business and learn the craft and be comfortable doing it. But it never occurred to me to try anything else, really. And it worked out.
And so as you were developing and finding your voice, at what point did you realize, because you do such a good job of honing in on like social anxiety and those awkward situations in life, at what point did you realize that was like what you could do in your voice and what you could really mine for comedy material?
Well, you know, the first thing that we did professionally really was The Office with Ricky. And, you know, a lot of that was us talking about things that we had experienced, you know, working in offices and sort of our real life take on things. And I had done sort of, you know, internships and various different kinds of things, answering phones in call centers and all kinds of stuff. And he'd been in sort of middle management. And we very quickly realized there was lots of common ground, and there was stuff that, you know, whenever they set a comedy in an office, it was always about kind of wacky goings on with the backdrop of an office. But to us, like, what was interesting was the actual experience of being there, the kind of personalities and the people. But our intention was never to sort of, I don't think, to zero in on social awkwardness or anxieties. It was just sort of, whenever we tried to be truthful about the world, that was the stuff that came bubbling up, you know. And I guess my experience of life has always been just fearful of embarrassing myself socially. And this happened when I finished the season of Hello Ladies. Some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but I went to a party at the home of the comedian Sarah Silverman, and got there, and it was a very glamorous, fun party, and there was lots of comedians, and you never want to embarrass yourself in front of comedians because they'll never let you forget, obviously. And somewhere along the line, someone offered me a piece of chocolate. Oh, thanks, great, yeah, I'll have a piece of chocolate. I didn't realize that there was what we call marijuana in the chocolate, and I very quickly found myself in a sort of hole, like a psychological hole from which I couldn't escape. The world just seemed to close in on me. It was like I was inside my own body, but like just peeking out of my eyes, just looking at the world, like clinging on inside my own body. And tried to have a lie down for a while, but I'm 6'7" and I took up like 3 couches, and it was like, have you ever seen a picture of like a giant anaconda feasting after it's eaten a goat? It was just like this long thing. And then I thought, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to the bathroom. That'll freshen me up. And well, if you ever do get stoned without realizing, don't stare at yourself in the mirror. Just looking into your own soul, because that doesn't help. And I don't know how long I was in the bathroom. It could have been 5 minutes, could have been 3 hours. Came back outside, thought I'll get a breath of fresh air, but I was so screwed up that the route I took led me through an 8-foot plate glass window, which shattered in its entirety. The glass just exploded, and suddenly I was outside of the party, looking back in at the party as bits of glass fell in front of me. And you realize in that moment that there's no sort of social training for that. You know what I mean? Like, your mother doesn't say, if you ever get stoned at a party and you walk through a window, you're just supposed to go, ta-da, and then leave. So I was just there, and I remember feeling some blood on my hand and things, and just having all I remember thinking was, I don't know what I do now. And then it's just fragments. Then I remember sort of leaving the room. I remember looking back, and the face I saw looking at me was Jeff Ross. You know who I mean? The roast master general who makes a living from mocking people. He was the first face I saw. And then I remember sitting in the lobby waiting for a cab, And I remember hearing two people arriving for the party. And as they walked past me, I just heard this woman say, "Did you hear that some asshole just walked through a window?" And I'm there covered in blood. And then I just remember sort of getting home, and then I remember writing an email to Sarah saying, "Dear Sarah, thank you for a wonderful party. I don't know if you noticed, but I walked through a window." And she was very generous about it. But anyway, my point being that that social anxiety, social, clumsiness still occurs to me. That was only a couple of years ago.
So fame doesn't help social anxiety.
No. Well, it makes it worse because now you're in the public eye. So now people are observing and monitoring you. I once saw I saw a comment in a magazine, like one of those kind of spotted. It was something like spotted Stephen Merchant ogling Scarlett Johansson. I've never met Scarlett Johansson. I've never been in a room with Scarlett Johansson. Where did that come from? If I was in a room with Scarlett Johansson, I would ogle her, but I wouldn't get caught. I'm one of the great oglers. I can ogle, secretly. I've been doing it since I was 15. I'm ogling women now. They don't even realize. But it's weird that you suddenly become very aware that people observe you, whether you like it or not. In this instance, not truthfully, but other times. So that makes you, in a weird way, more socially, awkward than you were before.
So that's in social situations, embarrassing moments. What about professionally? You've been doing stand-up for a long time. Do you ever have a moment where you just totally bombed on stage and there's just no escaping it?
Yes, although it hasn't happened since I returned to stand-up. It happened earlier on in my career. When I first started, I sort of played a character because people didn't know who I was. And even though I used my own name, the joke was sort of that I thought I was a big shot comedian, that the people that had never heard of me. So I would come out and say, "Hey, you can't believe your luck. This is going to be great." I didn't like your attitude as I walked on. You didn't seem to clap much, but and then I would kind of go off and I would come back on, and it was almost like an anti-show. And if audiences tuned in to the joke, they really enjoyed it because it was sort of almost making fun of the very nature of stand-up comedy and the artificiality of stand-up comedy. And if they went for it, it was great, and I had a great time. But if they didn't go for it, I didn't have an act. Like, that was the act. And I remember doing it in a place called Exeter, not far from Devon, funnily enough. And none of them got it. I mean, just death. Just the worst. And just you plowing through it, and you're still chugging away. And I did actually hear someone shout, "Taxi for the comedian." Yeah, which I thought was just a myth. I didn't realize people actually shouted it, but they did. And you don't get paid unless you do your full 20 minutes. So now you're just in a room with people who hate you, and they must be thinking, "Why is he still talking?" But you're obligated to. And eventually I came off, and you go in the dressing room, and I remember the waitress said she thought that was very funny. She understood the joke because she'd seen a lot of comedy, but everyone else hated it. And I remember calling my agent immediately. I was like, "I'm never doing stand-up comedy again. I'm out." And he said, "Well, you're contractually obliged." And I remember the next day having to take a train to my next gig and sitting on my own in a cinema. And I remember watching the Scary Movie. Remember that first? That didn't cheer me up. And then having to go on again that night, and went on just dreading it. And that night they all got it. They went for it and they loved it. And that was sort of my experience for years, was these sort of ups and downs of comedy. And in recent years, it's been a bit more consistent. But you never quite know. You never know what to expect. You can never get complacent with stand-up. It's very strange.
And so you've been so successful overseas and here. Is there anything you've noticed that resonates more with audiences or over there or here in the States? Or is funny no matter where you are?
Well, I've never been convinced of this idea, that there's a difference in sort of American and British sensibilities, or indeed European ones. My feeling is there's a distinction more between sort of taste. It's a question of taste. Like, I think there's stupid audiences and there's smart audiences, and there's lots of people in between. And I think I've been lucky since I came back to stand-up that people have sort of come to see me rather than I'm just on a bill somewhere. And generally speaking, I've played now in US. I just come back from Scandinavia and playing in Nordic countries, and I've done Australia, New Zealand, and as long as the people seem to speak English, it's gone well. And the Nordic countries were incredible. No, I'm not being arrogant. That's just the case. That's just the truth of it. A little bit arrogant, but yeah, I just did these Scandinavian shows in Sweden and Iceland, and they're incredible. Some standing ovations. And I was saying to my support guy, we're definitely not this funny. I think they were just pleased that we'd showed up, because it's a long way. But I haven't really noticed a big distinction. And I hope it's, I tried to talk about things which I think are universal in that, and chasing love and whatever, I think is a fairly common subject across the world. So I've never noticed a big distinction.
If you ever do find love, is that going to ruin your comedy material? When you find your soulmate?
Yeah. Will it do what, sorry?
Will it destroy your comedy material? What are you going to...
Probably, yes. My hope is that then there'll just be lots of stories about, the difficulties of marriage and, and I can't imagine it's all plain sailing once you're married. I don't imagine that there's just rainbows and birds singing constantly. So I'm hoping that there's still plenty of misery and then I'll just, I'll go to a party and accidentally do some heroin and then I'll be fine. I'll have plenty of material.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
You've obviously been tremendously successful working with Ricky Gervais in the past, and then you both kind of split off and did your own thing and were still successful. Is there any plans to reunite and work on any projects in the future again?
Not at the moment. Only really, we've sort of slightly got out of sync with each other, kind of time-wise, schedule-wise. People have asked me, why was Ricky not involved with Hello Ladies? And I mean, the reality is that he's been in a relationship, in the same relationship with the same girl, since he was about 20 or 21. He's never been in the dating world, the dating scene. So it's just not an area that is of interest to him, really, or that he can relate to. And so consequently, we've got slightly out of step with one another. But that's not to say there won't be something else down the road. It's just nothing brewing at the moment.
You can be honest with us. Is there anything about the American Office that you just hate?
That I hate?
Yeah, that you just can't, you're like, I can't believe they did that to my baby.
Not really. I'm not that, it would never occur to me that to sort of approach it like that. In fact, if anything, I remember when they talked about redoing it, I was very keen that we weren't heavily involved at the sort of base level, the scripting level and stuff, because it seemed to me that shows that they tried to remake before and the original creators were very involved, they had been too precious. They literally tried to replicate it sort of beat for beat. And I think I was always very keen that they just run with it and do their own thing, really. I was always very impressed. I was very thrilled. I thought Carell was fantastic, and as were the whole cast. And geez, they did like 9 seasons. I don't know how many episodes they did in the end. So it was much more easy for us to be sort of boutique about it. And we only did 2 seasons and a special. So on the whole, I was just really impressed. I directed an episode once, and I was in the writing room for a week, and it was a thrill. It was a thrill to see people, that creative and these ideas sort of, pinballing around the room. And I honestly, I was always, and it was funny because, I was never able to enjoy The Office as a fan because we were so heavily involved in our version, whereas it suddenly seemed like we'd sort of come up with this template, and then they were sending us episodes of a show that we wanted to see, and so no, I was always very pleased and impressed.
You've been so successful across so many different mediums with radio, podcasts, TV, movies, stand-up. Is there anything else that you want to explore in the world of comedy?
Well, I'd never look at it that way, I guess. To me, it's sort of, like I said earlier, it was a hobby that became a profession. And I still feel like a kind of enthusiastic amateur. I still feel I'm always excited when I see someone who's great at any of those things. I'm still dazzled by a great show I see, or a great movie, or great stand-up, and I still feel like I want to get better and improve myself. And ultimately, I think sometimes from the outside, people think that you do things because you want to be famous, or you do things for money, or you do things because you want to be on a red carpet, or you want something to be bigger or more successful than what you've done before. To me, it's just, I just enjoy the work. I just enjoy being in a writing room. I enjoy working on material. Like, that's the stuff that's fun to me, you know, and I've been very lucky that those other things have come as a byproduct of it. But that's never the reason I get up, is in the morning. It's always about, you know, the fun and the thrill of sort of writing something or creating something.
Excellent. Well, I know we have a microphone out here. I think some of these guys want to ask you some questions as well. Anyone? Questions for Stephen?
How much Photoshop went into your Hello Ladies poster?
Well, that's not my body. Bizarrely. I don't know why they didn't feel comfortable asking me to pose for this. But they that's not me. It's my head, obviously, but it's not my body. So quite a lot of Photoshop, clearly. My arm is way longer than that, as you can see. So, yes, I don't know why they didn't call me and say, Steve, can you pop in, take your shirt off? But they didn't really. What's the implication of your question there? What's the subtext of this question? How much Photoshop? Are you saying that? How much are you? All right. What's your percentage? What do you think? You're saying that you don't think I have that physique, or you don't think my skin's that good, or you don't think I'm that devilishly handsome in real life?
So just talking about the beard.
The beard's yes. They had to take that away. Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like I should do one of those protests, like actresses who are like, here's the real me. I refuse to do Photoshop. Definitely not. You're going to put this on the side of a bus? You better bloody Photoshop. Yeah, I find when I shave my beard off, I look about 3 months younger, as you can see. But yes, no, there was quite considerable Photoshop.
So one of my favourite bits that you're in is the Liam Neeson improv scene. What are your favourite bits that you've done?
Oh, crumbs, yes, favourite bits. I was very pleased when in Extras we did a scene where I'm in a scene with Robert De Niro, which was crazy. And I remember we had this idea that throughout the series of Extras, Ricky's character would be aspiring to meet De Niro. But we hadn't actually got a promise from Robert De Niro that he was going to be in it. But we just started filming it in the hope that he would say yes. So we'd be filming all these scenes with people saying, are you going to meet Robert De Niro? I hope you meet Robert De Niro. Thinking, well, what are we going to do if that doesn't work out? We're going to have to go back to each of those scenes, and then just as someone's about to say Robert De Niro, we'd have to cut away and then just lay in over the top, you know, Mr. T, or whoever we could get. And then miraculously, we got the opportunity to get him, and so I found myself in this hotel room with Robert De Niro. And bizarrely, one of my second or third cousin was in the band Bananarama. And I don't know if you recall, but Bananarama did a song called Robert De Niro's Waiting. And I found myself in this scene with Robert De Niro, and he's waiting in the scene. That's the whole point of the scene. And I just started singing, Robert De Niro's waiting, talking Italian. You ever heard that song? And he, like you, just shook his head. And to this day, I don't know if he was acting or whether he never has heard that song. But we didn't put it in the finished show, so it was just a moment that I shared for myself. But that was a thrill.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. You're a lot funnier than I expected, so thanks.
We got the Photoshop guy. I'm marginally impressed. I mean, I wasn't even gonna come along, but they needed someone to fill up the numbers, so I've.
Yeah, thank you for that. And
Okay.
You mentioned Robert De Niro, Ricky Gervais. What other celebrities and comedians you would like to work with in the future?
That I would like to work with. Well, I'd like to work with Prince. Not musically. I'd just like to stand next to him in a scene, because I'm 6'7", and he's like 5'1" or something. I just think that would be a funny image. Prince, I would like to work with. who else? Crumbs. I'm lucky that I've met a lot of people that I've admired. I've worked with a lot of people now. I worked with David Bowie. We wrote a song with David Bowie for extras, which was crazy. And I remember Ricky phoned up David Bowie to talk about this song. And David Bowie answered and just went, "Hello, Rick, I'm just eating a banana." And it was just so amazing to us that David Bowie did anything as mundane as eat a banana. Because in our minds, like, he was dressed with the zigzag and the kind of Ziggy Stardust hair and everything, eating a banana. Iman, do we have any bananas, love? And that's the thing, is like the more you work with sort of showbizy celebrity people, the more you realize that they are just kind of ordinary people. Like, we found out that Samuel L. Jackson wanted to do extras. It was just so weird to us that he'd watched the DVD. Like, that he opened the wrapper, you know. I can't get it started. Get a knife. I can't get the paper, the plastic off. And that's the thing I've noticed constantly since I've worked with in any kind of showbizy people. So consequently, my point being that the idea of sort of working with someone just simply because they're well known, sort of that novelty wears off after a while, and then it becomes, I guess, it is people that you admire. But it'd be fun to do something with, Larry David, someone like that would be great, or Louis C.K., who I think is fantastic. But yeah, who knows?
Thank you. In the first season of Hello Ladies, there's a lot of instances where I'm cheering for your character, and then you do something that is just cringeworthy. I'm thinking of like the scene in the pool at the party, and the awful joke, or that, if he just would have stayed in this spot, it all would have worked out for him. Mm-hmm. So in the next season, am I gonna get that win for your character, or is it just going to be more cringeworthy moments?
Well, in this movie, I think you'll be pleased that he's learned a little bit from his mistakes. So he's a little bit better at it, and I think there are some kind of cheery moments. Is that the word? Some moments that I think hopefully will make you cheer. Like I said earlier, the making people cringe. It's never been an ambition. It's just stuff I put these scenes in because they seem sort of funny to me, or they seem real in some way. Again, because the character's trying too hard, and then people say they're watching it like that, and I'm constantly. And like I said earlier with the Sarah Silverman thing, if you went to a party with me, you'd now be watching. Is he? Stay away from the windows. Stay away from the windows. It's like I do make those kind of mistakes, and so. I never set out to try and make people feel awkward. It just seems to bubble up. But certainly in this, I think you'll be pleased that he's kind of getting his groove on a bit more. And yes, there'll still be some awkward moments, but it hopefully won't be quite as agonizing for you. Only real life is where it's agonizing.
Well, you are as awesome as I thought you would be, so thank you for that.
Very much.
We're huge Idiot Abroad fans, so any awesome Karl moments that we didn't get to see on TV?
I think we've put most of the Karl moments out there. For people that aren't aware of Karl Pilkington, he was a guy, he's often described as having been our producer on the radio. He was not a producer. He was a man... He was a man who pressed some buttons, start the CD, pause the CD at this radio station. Ricky and I did this show, and then one day we had him there pressing buttons, and we asked him a question. I can't remember exactly what he said. It would have been one of his, something like, I remember early on, him saying, a few of my choice favorites were him saying, "What are those things in the film Gremlins called?" I was on the way here and I saw a bee have a heart attack. Right? We were talking to him about how certain celebrities are only famous because of who their parents are. Kim Kardashian. Or in England, people like Callum Best, who is the son of the footballer, Pete Best. Not Pete Best, he's the drummer, George Best. Anyway, we're talking about, they're only famous because of who their parents are. And Karl said, well, you could say the same about Jesus. Which is weirdly profound in a strange way. And then, we sent him off on these journeys. We wanted to see his reactions to these amazing places. And he was never impressed. He's just a man I don't think he's ever been impressed by anything. He went to the Great Wall of China and said, it's an all right wall. It's not the Great Wall. We should be called the All Right Wall of China, is what it should be called. But anyway, he's doing his own thing at the moment because I think he decided he didn't want to share the money with Ricky and I. So he's just doing his own. He's doing his own thing. We're still good friends with him, but he just, he doesn't need us. We've freed him out into the world like a wild animal, like something. We always thought of him as something that like the Victorians would bring back, from their adventures. They'd have found a Karl in the wild and they'd bring him back. There'd be lots of white-coated men in kind of laboratories studying Karl and prodding him and things. And that's what we feel we've done for the world.
I think that's it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. And, thanks to those that felt I lived up to the expectation and turned some other people's feelings around.